Hello everyone and welcome to another session of Figma tutorial. In this video, you are going to get to know the concept of layout grid. Layout grid helps us design elements accurately and increases the speed of project design. How can we use the layout grid? When you select a frame, the layout grid item will appear in this section. By clicking on the plus icon, we can see the grids here. These grids are actually a guide for the detailed design of the elements and do not appear in the output of our projects. Okay, if I click on this icon, I can access the options of the grid section. From the size section, you can change the size of the grids. From the color section, change the color of the grids. And from the opacity section, you can increase or decrease the amount of opacity. I entered the size value, for example, 100. As you can see, the size of the grids will change to 100 pixels. From the color section, you can change the color of the grid to the desired color. And from the opacity section, as I said, you can increase or decrease the amount of opacity. Okay, here, in addition to the grid item, we also have the columns and rows. If I select columns, as you can see here, a series of columns will be created on our frame. Like grids, these columns are also our guide for the exact arrangement of elements. And they are not displayed in the project output. Let's go to the options of the columns section. In the count field, you can specify the number of columns. For example, I enter the number 12. You can change the color of the columns from the color section. And just like the grid section, you can change the opacity from the opacity section. In the type field, we can specify the type of columns. By default, the type is in stretch mode, in which the columns are stretched to the width of the frame. In this type, the width value is set to auto, which means we cannot change its size and the width value is changed automatically. From the margin section, we can set the distance from the right and left sides to create wide space. For example, if I enter a margin value of 100, an empty space of 100 pixels will be created from the right side and 100 pixels from the left side, making the columns a little more compact. From the gutter section, you can increase or decrease the column spacing. However, please note that when type is on stretch mode and the width value is on auto mode, the more you increase the gutter value, the width value will decrease. Very well, let's go to the next type, which is center. In the center mode, the columns are placed in the middle of the frame, and in this type, you can change the width to your desired size. For instance, I set the width to 80 pixels and the gutter value to 20 pixels. Here, you can see that the columns are in the middle of the frame and we can change the width and gutter value. Unlike type stretch, no matter how much we increase the value of the gutter, because we have determined the width ourselves, the width of the columns will remain constant. Very well, the next types are right and left, whose settings are similar to center, with the difference that in the right type, the columns are arranged from the right side, and in the left type, the columns are placed on the left side. The next item we have here are the rows, which are similar to the columns, except that in the columns, we make the settings for the vertical mode, but in the rows, we consider the settings for the horizontal mode. Okay, I go back to the columns. With the settings you see, I want to draw some elements in this section. For example, I plan to design the header of a site. For this, I go to the rectangle tool and draw a rectangle with the width of the columns. As you can see, in the width section, the value of the width of the rectangle is 1180 pixels, which is actually the entire width of 12 columns plus the empty space between them. Now I want to consider some cards to display the content of the site. I go to the rectangle tool and want it to contain 4 cards, with each card covering a 3-column width. In this part, holding the Shift key, I draw a square with the size of 3 columns. In order for the width of my square to be accurate, I hold Shift and move it like this until it matches to the right edge of this column, and from the left side, I move it to the left edge of this column. Now I go to the width of the square. As you can see, the width value is 280 pixels. Actually, the total width of these 3 columns and the empty space between them is 280 pixels. I want to make a copy of this square. For this, I hold the Alt and Shift keys and move this square to this area. Now, in order to duplicate this copy, I press the Ctrl and D keys twice to create 2 copies of the first copy. As you can see, we drew a schema of a site plan with the help of columns. You can design the elements accurately and in the right position by using the layout grid and the options placed in this section.